I think one of the things that I think would be nice is to living without fear.
One in 3 women experience violence in their lifetime.
1 in 4 adult men has used physical violence against a female partner at some point.
1 in 8 girls and 1 in 11 boys alive today have been raped or sexually assaulted before they were 18.
Half of young men think that feminism or gender equality has gone too far.
The rise of authoritarianism, this gender war that has been manufactured. I think that we are in a crisis of humanity.
We have to be addressing this with a sense of urgency. It's an issue that we have to address now.
All right.
Gary, interview.
I'm Gary Barker, the CEO of Equimundo.
Hi, I'm Liz Dartnell, the Executive Director of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative.
Hello, I'm Claudia Garcia Moreno. I am co-founder of the SVRI and I chair the SVRI Forum.
Hi, I'm Jane Dungu and I'm a research fellow at the University of Exeter.
Hi, I'm Tess Marelna Atzbaha, Senior Program Officer at Wellspring Philanthropic Fund.
Hi, my name is Twisha Nevetia, and I'm the Learning Coordinator at Raising Voices.
Hi, I'm Tarana Burke. I'm the founder of the Me Too movement and Chief Vision Officer at Me Too International.
I am Calliope Migiru. I'm the Chief of the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls section at UN Women. Violence against women and girls, it's not only one of the most serious violations of human rights and dignity, it threatens the security of a country. It's the strongest factor predicting broader violence and war and conflict eruption in one country.
We've got to acknowledge the size of sexual violence, gender-based violence in the world. It's not reduced in meaningful ways over the last couple of decades.
I think one of the biggest crises that we're having is this pretty extreme backlash against gender equality, where there's repeals of female genital mutilation legislation that's happened in the Gambia, and all of these anti-LGBTQ bills that are coming in different parts of Africa that are very scary, and they have this chilling effect on the entire feminist movement and gender justice ecosystem.
Really sobering data that we've done in the US and many countries of how many young men think feminism has gone too far, or think feminism is somehow a frightening word. And I think I can be either panicked about that, or I can say, I think we've got to hold ourselves accountable to that challenge and say, how do we present this, discuss it? Why is this good for young men? I think we need to be able to ask that, and I do believe we can answer it.
Violence is a complex, systemic problem. It's rooted in power imbalances, and it needs complex, sophisticated solutions.
We started the SVRI around 25 years ago. Many of the problems that we were facing then, we are still facing. We started the first forum, I think it was 2009. And it was like, okay, let's bring together the researchers that we know that are working in this field. And we had a meeting in Joburg, actually, that was less than 200 people. It was a very amazing experience for everyone, because I think a lot of the people who came felt like they were lonely wolves in the wilderness. And it was like, wow, there's other people doing this work and I'm not completely alone, and, connecting. And then, every successive forum has become larger and larger and larger. It's word of mouth, right? It's kind of people saying, oh, this is a great meeting, you must come.
Oh, that's it. I think this is a place to come to make things happen. People were like, oh, let's wait and have that meeting at SVRI.
SVRI is not just for researchers, it actually brings together a community of professionals, practitioners, researchers, activists, funders, really like a microcosm of the field, so that everyone can come together and take action together.
This place has such a broad spectrum of people, all focused on the same thing, figuring out solutions.
One delegate was telling me yesterday how 2 of her students were saying this has been a transformative experience for them. And I said, why? Why is it so different from other conferences? And she said, because people are so kind. It's a space in which you feel like you're included. And so for me, that's fundamental. It comes from within, and then we share it with others.
Doing this kind of work, we need lots of compassion and love and solidarity. And I think this is something that SVRI was creating a lot.
Let's come together, let's build community, let's figure out who's doing what part, let's figure out how we work interwoven together, and let's move forward, because it matters how you fight.
My own experience of intimate partner violence has drawn me to the work I do. When I was going through that experience, I thought I was the only one, or there was something wrong with me for me to be in that relationship. Then, when I found out that 1 in 3 women experience sexual violence, physical violence, it was really shocking to me, but it was a very important learning experience for me, because it made me realize it's not me, it's a bigger structural problem which thrives in secrecy and shame.
Somehow it was always your fault, right? I must have done something wrong. I must have said no in the wrong way. I must. And that was kind of the automatic reaction when something happened to you, no? And I would like to think that the younger generation, that my daughter's generation, who's 23, would not.
The challenge is a lot of us aren't geared towards hearing those really hard stories. Often we just want to live in our bubble of ignorance. We have to hear the stories. We have to have the opening plenaries where people talk about the impacts of violence on our lives.
It is about shining a light on the things that have been until very recently very invisible, very taboo. It's in the privacy of your home, you don't talk about it. Or, if you were raped, you don't talk about it, because the consequences are always worse for the woman who discloses that she's been abused.
One of the single largest drivers of men's use of violence against others is violence they witnessed or experienced growing up.
Having exposure and experiences of violence in childhood, and particularly child sexual violence, really does increase our risks of either becoming a victim as a woman or a perpetrator as a man. And so for me, it's always been trying to break that cycle.
So for us, it's not, do we look at the trauma for women survivors or the trauma that men have experienced? The prevention will happen when we do both. And I think for men, that's been particularly difficult, of saying, what do I need to do? How do I speak up at a workplace? How do I speak up if I see my brother, another man, use it around me? How do I break that cycle of, the so-called locker room talk that objectifies women and girls, that is homophobic in its tone too often? When you kind of feel like, well, these are my mates, what am I supposed to do about that? And to say, no, there's things you can do to step in about this. This is on you too.
We can't discount the power of community. We can't discount the power in numbers to sort of dismantle the things that allow for the proliferation of sexual and gender-based violence, which is shame and fear and power and privilege. And we can dismantle those things in community together, collectively, with movement.
There is no magic solution, right? It is really the result of a complex interaction of issues at the level of the individual, at the level of the family, societies, etc., and everything gets compounded. We need to work with the systems, the legal system, the health system, the education system, to have that transformation and move them towards more equal, more human rights-based responses. We need to be working also at the level of families and addressing some of the big structural drivers like poverty. We know that levels of education are related to. So what is the package of interventions that is going to help us reduce or prevent violence in the most efficient way?
I think this is a really complex issue, and so it's very hard for policymakers to take up and integrate into their, budgets and into their programs at a national, subnational, municipal levels, because there's no one solution. There's no silver bullet that's going to say goodbye violence. And so we have to be building collaboratives. We have to be identifying solutions that can address multiple risk factors. And if we invest early, the bang in our buck is so much bigger over the longer term. I'm just a nerd. I love science and I love evidence for good. I want to build a very healthy evidence-building ecosystem, because I know evidence is power.
There are a lot of evidence-based programmings that have shown to prevent violence in a reasonable time frame. We just have to make sure that work is sustained and that this generation of researchers are still connecting with that bigger picture.
So researchers, we're good at generating evidence in our corners and publishing on it, but there's a need for us to communicate this evidence to different spaces. People who are excellent at communicating and creating advocacy, taking on that evidence and pushing it through doors that we don't have access to. Because sometimes it's about the clever communication of the research.
This is information those of us who are out in the world are desperate for. We know it sort of anecdotally because we live it, but when you have somebody come and say, oh, no, this is not just a feeling, this is a fact. I have the information, and then we can take that and we can go back to our parliaments and our councils and our governments and say, we have facts.
We have some wonderful forms of evidence that if we could get to policymakers, we could be starting to make change. We have prevention programs. We do know how to reduce violence against women and intimate partner violence in particular in communities. And how do we take them to scale? We have to be working with governments.
Misogyny and gender inequality is part of cultures. It's embedded in all of the systems. It's in the air, it's in the water, it's in everything, right? And so what I see as political will and political commitment is in how you build out the implementation.
How can we translate complicated research findings into some simple messaging for governments and policymakers, and creating an irresistible message and mission that if they don't do it, then there are going to be some really very serious consequences that they're going to affect not only the individual women and girls, men and boys, families, homes, communities, and the country in general.
We have not put aside enough funds in development assistance and national budgets from philanthropists for women's empowerment. It's a $10 billion space. That's not nearly enough for the size of the problem.
Funding currently is projectized, so it means like we're living in these one-year cycles of funding, and it's really difficult to envision change, to create innovation, to learn from our findings if we're constantly trying to write the next proposal. So we need to think about longer-term, more core funding. I also want us to advocate for a pooled funding group that around a collective vision of the world. What do we need to be investing in to end violence against women and violence against children? We have to be investing in research and evidence that is guided by priorities that are being developed by the field for the field. We need to invest in women's rights movements. We need to invest in civil society organizations. We need to invest in evidence builders. We also need to invest in fields builders. And we need that healthy ecosystem to be really making a change.
We need that consistent funding that HIV had, for example, so that you can build programs, you can build capacity, you can really start to change systems, because we are not going to resolve this just by little interventions here and there.
We are looking at 30 years probably of investment that is needed to make a real, critical, material change in violence against women and girls.
And then within a full generation, we could eradicate violence. What we're missing is the investment, and not just the monetary or financial investment, but the political investment.
I don't think you can work in this type of work without being optimistic, and that you really do believe that change is going to happen, because it is happening. It's happening in my lifetime. Look what's happened within the SVRI. We started off tiny. We had a list of 100 people when we took it on. We now have 15,000 people around the world signed up to hear from the SVRI on a weekly basis.
If we were really in the type of crisis that meant the end of it all, those numbers would be dwindling, right? We would see less people wanting to join the movement. We would see less people wanting to be involved. We would see less research. We would see less activism, but we're not actually seeing that.
I felt a sense of belonging. I felt a sense of purpose, and it's only been possible because of the amazing people that are drawn to this field.
I take joy in being with my people every day. I love that.
That is the strength of SVRI. Everyone who has come here says that when they go out more empowered, more energized, more eager to put in the work and to create change.
We've been doing a lot of work together as a collective in order to create this kind of momentum and urgency.
Men are finding more meaning in being caregivers and fathers. So that does tell me we've got humanity in there. We get to be better in the world as men in particular when we embrace equality, consent, thoughtfulness, caring. So there's a huge win for men in this. We get to be better humans when we love better, when we care more.
We now have a generation of young people who get the respect of using pronouns. They get the respect of bodily autonomy. They get the deep necessity for those things to make sure people's humanity stays intact.
The people are the solution. We are the solution. There's power in bringing incredible voices together.
Together,
We can end
Gender-based
Violence
Against women and children.
Children
In our lifetime.